Thank you for taking the time to participate on this live broadcast. Next up is Jill Alexander for a conversation on fall protection overview for coating contractors. Hey, everyone. Welcome to an all-new live Coatings Talk. I'm joined this evening by Jill Alexander. Jill, welcome.
Welcome. It's great to see you again, Jim.
It's great to see you again as well. Now, I kind of purposely put the title for coatings contractors, but really what we're going to be talking about tonight is important for construction, any different industry, even for personal life as well, because fall protection is a serious matter and everyone needs to take it serious. And I felt we should do this again. We've done this multiple times where we've talked about fall protection, and we want to continue to talk about it because it's still a major cause of death in construction, and also lots of injuries as well. Right. Jill, before we get started, why don't you do a favor and introduce, I know everybody probably knows you already, but if you could go ahead and for that one or two people out there that don't know who you are, explain who you are, what you do, and then talk a little bit about Safeways as well.
Sure. So Jill Alexander, I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Safeways. And Safeways is the fall protection industry's most responsive partner. So we're located here in Concord, North Carolina, and we manufacture all of the components that we'll talk about tonight that are needed for fall protection and for the fall arrest system right here in Concord, North Carolina. So that's pretty exciting. And Safeways is part of a larger family, Canopy Brands, that has several business units that all are related to working at height. So as the industry's most responsive, I like to say that the thing that we need to do in order to be responsive is first to listen. And so that we take the unique needs and requirements of all of our customers into mind before we can offer solutions to them. So being responsive means being there for them, having the products they need, having the expertise that they need, and partnering with them. As you said, we need to continue talking about this because unfortunately it's still a serious problem. It's number one cited OSHA violation for 9-10 years in a row. So really need to all think about what it's going to take to make the change. So I'm proud to be partnering again with you to be a vocal proponent of fall protection and making sure that people understand why it's needed, when to use it, how to use it, some of the basics.
Yeah, when you talk about the number of years this has been ongoing related to fall protection and fall issues, when you look at the OSHA statistics, fall slips and trips, they account for like nearly 35% of construction workplace deaths. And that's a high number. It's a number that can be, in most cases, minimized. It probably will never be eliminated, but it can be minimized with just basic training on fall protection and also utilizing the right equipment related to that. In over 21,000 non-fatal injuries happen every year related to, falls and slips and trips. And then number one, cause of falls according to OSHA is a lack of guardrails. And a lot of it deals with also too, training when you're on a rooftop, for example, or if you're on scaffolding.
Yeah.
So when you're working at heights, a lot of it, the training might not be adequate, or it might in some cases not be there for those workers to fully understand and appreciate, what can happen at height. And although you might think you have sure footing, anything could happen on scaffolding right. or on a rooftop. Right. And so let's talk a little bit about the next thing I'd like to talk a little bit about is related to the OSHA Part M 1926-500. And I'm going to kind of read off a little bit of this, but it has defining terms, and the subpart M covers fall protection. And in it really sets forth workplace regulations for the conditions, also related to operations and circumstances where fall protection has to be provided. And additionally, it establishes minimum requirements for fall protection. It classifies the fall protection required to people who would workers who would work on scaffolding, cranes, derricks, steel erection, towers, storage tanks, aerial lifts, poles, power transmission towers, stairways, and even ladders. And when we look at OSHA regulations, and you working in an industry that really services safety across different multiple industries, how important is it to have compliance to OSHA regulations and also OSHA required training as well, in your
Well,
opinion?
I mean, it's important for the most basic reason that it's going to protect our workers at height. I mean, the OSHA is our friend, right? OSHA is not a naughty word. It is the reason. Sometimes, sure, it can be complicated, but the reason that OSHA exists is to protect people, whether that's in fall protection or whether that's with hazards, or whether that's one of the other, hundreds of thousands of things that OSHA mandates. So the number one reason is to keep workers safe, and everybody wants that ultimately. But it also is important to have it be required and regulated. One of the statistics that we've talked a little bit about are that roofers, which is a big part of the coatings industry, are 3 times more likely than the general construction population to actually have a fatal fall. And workers in general, workers across all industries, are 8 times more likely to wear fall protection when it is required. It's required by OSHA. It needs to be required by the companies. It needs to be required by the subcontractors. And that's an area that we could dig into for probably a full hour. But I think one of the reasons that the roofing and coatings industry is so prevalent with falls is because there's a lot of subcontractor use. And the further you get down in that chain of requirement and regulation, the more lax you tend to be, the more some of the rules and regulations tend to slide. So we need to follow those mandates all the way down. So, I mean, anything that's going to save lives is something that is very important to me personally, to the construction industry, to our trade workers.
Yeah, and I would imagine enforcement can be very difficult. You're working, with a set number of inspectors and people who might be able to, really kind of observe and document, and then also to when it comes to issuing violations and things like that. But it really comes down to individually, the companies, their leadership, the ownership of the companies, the contractors. No matter where, like you said, where you're in that chain, if you're a subcontractor of a contractor, you still need to have safety as a top priority. Let's talk a little bit about, when you're working on an existing structure or a new structure, the first thing, especially related to painting, industrial painting, is you could be on a structure and kind of, basically harness to the structure, working your way up and down it, or you might be, moving across it at height. And then the other thing that I'm used to a lot of times is scaffolding that's going to be built, or even suspended, where you would have like a suspended span underneath of a bridge structure, for example. So you're going to have harness, you're going to have fall protection, and those types of situations. What can you describe what a fall arrest system is?
Yeah, we talked about, from a marketing angle, that Safeways wants to evaluate the situation. And one of the reasons that fall protection
Hmm.
can be so tricky, and that it can be hard to follow the OSHA mandates, and it can be hard to do the right thing for the workers, is because every situation is unique. What's needed on a scaffolding is very different than what's needed on a rooftop system. You can't anchor to a scaffold. There's no suitable anchorage point on a scaffold. So you have to be near a structure, an existing structure that allows you to anchor, or you have to provide a mobile anchor unit. On a newer existing structure, one of the things that is also a big challenge is designing in for fall protection. So when you have a new structure, we need to start thinking sooner and thinking earlier about how do we place our anchors? How do we enable fall protection to be designed into the building? On an existing building, it may be something where you have to get an engineer involved, or a qualified person involved, somebody who has the skill set, the training, the education, to say, hey, this is how I can set up the system. What is a fall protection system? I mean, there are so many terms that you can become familiar with. And fall protection and fall prevention are two different things. Fall arrest and fall positioning are, you know, all different things. So I love fall prevention. The safest fall is the one that never happens, right? So it goes back to our hierarchy of controls, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later. But you know, if you can prevent the fall, if you can design in so you don't have to be at height, then that's going to be your safest environment. But if you can't, or if you're in a situation where you need to use a fall prevention system, you want to keep from falling. So being in that situation, you know, like with a guardrail or with netting or safety lines, whatever it is within that hierarchy that keeps you from falling, that's the best. Fall protection is then what's going to protect you if you do fall. Fall arrest is how you're going to be stopped when you fall. And so your fall protection system or your fall arrest system is going to consist of your ABCs of fall protection. You're going to have anchorage. What are you connected to that's going to stop you from hitting the next surface, the next working surface or next lower level? You're going to have your body wear, which is most of us are familiar with that harness. This is what is that I'm wearing that's going to keep me safe from falling. And then you have your connector. It's what's the link between you and the anchorage. So what is it that is stopping you as you fall, connecting to your body wear to that anchorage? And there's all sorts of different components in all sorts of different applications. You mentioned a scenario working along a roof where you may want to use what the industry calls a rat line. I liken it to a dog run or a dog lead, known as a horizontal lifeline, where you're wearing your harness and you've got an SRL or a lanyard that's connecting you to an anchorage point. That can be a fixed anchorage point. It can be on that horizontal lifeline so that you have the ability to move and work. So, I mean, those are just, you know, that all sounds really confusing to somebody who's new to working in construction or new to fall protection. And that's why we have documentation. That's why you need to have a competent person on site. That's why you need to have a qualified person on site, people who are overseeing this. And as the worker, my responsibility is to make sure that I'm safe, to ask the questions, to say, hey, is this something that I should be using a fall protection system? Do I need to wear a harness? Hey, what is this that I'm anchoring to? That doesn't look, I don't know what the anchorage requirements are by OSHA, but that doesn't look like it's going to hold me if I fall. So understanding just the basic elements so that you're able to ask those questions. It's, you know, we've talked a lot about the culture of safety, and it's everyone's responsibility to be part of that culture, from the worker to the supervisors to the engineers, through the general contractors, all the way up to the people who are actually footing the bill for that construction site. And you know, it's life, and you constantly have that friction between get the job done now, get the job done economically. Oh, and by the way, be safe while you're doing it. And one of the statistics that I love, you know, one of these questions you asked a little bit earlier is, you know, why do we have OSHA? Why is it important to do this? We want to keep workers safe, but OSHA studies and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics studies have shown that for every dollar that you invest in safety, you have a 4 to 6 time return. So for every dollar you invest, you're saving $4 to $6. So safety makes sense economically, financially, fiscally for the companies, as well as obviously doing the right thing and protecting the workforce.
Yeah, it's so important, Tom. Very good point. Failing to follow fall protection protocol is unfortunately a frequent problem in the construction industry. And you know, Jill, to your point, I think you know, you really kind of hit it on the head there, where you talked a little bit about how you're dealing with multiple layers of construction industry, different companies, and really it's a culture of safety. But it takes everyone. It's from the worker all the way up to the ownership of a company and the management of the company that really has to take that. And the other thing I wanted to point out, we have our names, we have different banners we have there, and mine says fall protection is serious. And for me, I view, I'm thinking more the aspect of the fall, how to protect the person when they have the fall. You say, let's remove fall protection, and someone might read that and say, what is she talking about? Why would we want to remove it? And the only way we're going to remove it is if we never allow it to happen to begin with.
Right.
And
Right.
that's where I think, when we were talking earlier before the stream started, I kind of looked at and said, what do you mean by let's remove fall protection? That sounds counterintuitive
Right.
there, but now it makes a lot of sense
Well,
based on
and
our conversation.
it's a little, I'm in marketing, so I love the play on words, right? So I'd like to remove fall protection. Again, hierarchy of controls. It's a last ditch effort, right? You want to not need fall protection. If you can engineer it out, then you don't need it and you're safer. The safest fall is the one that
Yeah,
never happens.
that
But
never happens.
also, let's remove fall protection from OSHA's top 10 list of citations.
Yeah.
I'd like to remove it from the list of most frequently cited, both training and actual. So fall protection
Mhm.
training and the actual implementation usage. Those two are in the top 10 all the time.
And, talking about citation, Tom also posted here, he's been on a work site where a worker fell 8 levels to the bridge deck below. 2 hours later, his NACE, now AMP inspector, spotted another worker at height who didn't have double hook lanyard. To your point about, we need to get this taken off of the that OSHA list of
Well,
top
and
violations.
it's everyone has their own stories, and there are many schools of thought as to how do we do this? What we're doing is not working. What
Mhm.
we're doing is not working. It's been 8, 9, 10 years and running. So there's a lot of conversations about what it's going to take. And I think it's all very valid. It's going to take a change in culture. It's going to take statistics. It's also going to take stories, personal stories. It becomes relevant when it becomes personal. Unfortunately, right? Because most of the time in that case, somebody's already gotten hurt or somebody's had a near miss from getting hurt. And I know, personally know people in the industry that failed to hook, that fell, or were wearing fall protection and didn't have it secured properly, or weren't wearing it properly, or weren't anchored properly. So they thought they were safe and found out that they weren't. So there's a lot of different elements that have to come into play. And one of the things that, out of all the fatal falls, a very recent study showed that, 48%, almost half of the people were wearing fall protection, and it wasn't being worn or utilized or anchored correctly. One of the things that I think it's going to take is a better education and a better understanding of taking the time to do the inspection. So training people to do an inspection of their equipment every single time, knowing that this piece of equipment could save your life. Take a look at it before you go up to that 610, 6, 8, 10, depending where, whether you're in construction or on scaffolding, all kinds of different heights. But if you're in doubt as to what height it is, wear fall protection. It's 4 feet, 4 feet in general industry. So if you're in a plant and you're doing maintenance, you're supposed to have fall protection on at 4 feet. In construction,
Yeah.
it's 6 feet. At scaffolding, it's only 10. But if you're at 6 feet, go ahead and wear your fall protection. It's surely not going to hurt you.
Yeah, a friend of mine who's retired now told me a really scary story. He was working in steel construction, and they were working on steel erection. He was at height. They always did a buddy check when they would look at their harnessing and anything they needed to
Right.
tie down on. If they were going to connect off, hook off, and everything like that. And they didn't do a buddy check, and he had gone up, and he was he was in his 20s. He was kind of acting out a little bit. And luckily, someone noticed that he wasn't properly set up properly, because he would have took a nasty fall, multiple stories. He would have never survived. He would
Right.
have fell right into the construction zone with all the equipment and everything. But it's so important even to have those buddy checks and safety checks and things like that. But to your point, the more you know, the better you're going to be. And the culture, I think, is so important as well. So let's talk a little about the reality of fall protection. And the first thing that really comes to my mind is that fall protection does take time. It takes effort. It takes commitment. It takes training, thorough training, and then also to a reassessment of the training to make sure that it did stick, and the investment part of it. You as a businesswoman, you as a provider of safety equipment and all the things that are important when it comes to safety, when you look at the investment into safety, the training, the equipment, everything, like especially for fall protection, why is it such a hard, in your opinion, why is it so hard sometimes for people to make that investment versus, they'll invest in other things, but they don't even think about sometimes stuff like fall protection, or it's just get what
Right.
we need and the bare minimum what we need to get. You know,
Um,
why do you
the
think that exists?
I think there's a lot of reasons, and it goes to, what are we going to change? I think, what is it going to take to enact change? And I think that two of the key things that come to mind are kind of the demographic and the culture. The demographic of being bulletproof. It's not going to happen to me. I've done this before. I don't need
Hmm.
safety equipment. It doesn't become real to people, even though there are a lot of deaths. The reality is the percent likelihood of the fall is still fairly minimal. It's like, why do people not wear motorcycle helmets? Why do people not put on their seatbelts? Right? They just don't think it's going to happen to them until until it's too late. And another area of that, I think, is this idea. It's interesting to me that fatal heights are somewhere in the middle. They're not like at 30 foot, you're less likely to experience a fatal fall than in that like 10 to 15 foot range. And again, when you're at 30 feet, when you're, I don't know how tall 30 feet is 6 stories up or whatever, your brain says, this is dangerous. If I fall, I'm going to die. I'm going to put on some fall protection. When you're at a 2-story building, when you're at 10 to 12 feet, you're like, I might break a leg. So your risk, your assessment of risk is lower. And so you're willing to take more of a chance. So there's actually a higher likelihood of dying in a fall because you're not hooked up in that 10 to 15 to 20 foot range, height range, than in the much higher ranges, because people take more precautions. So it's a lot about that risk perception, and everybody has different risk tolerances, right? Some people, South Carolina, they don't wear helmets when they ride motorcycles, right? So that perception of risk makes people feel like sometimes it's not that likely or it's not that important, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, very unfortunate. And the next thing I want to kind of cover is related to, let's call it a fall prevention plan.
Mhm.
Having a plan. How extensive of a plan do you really need to have in place? Can it be something very simple?
It can be very simple. I think the key to a fall protection plan, which is required by OSHA, you actually have to have a plan. You don't just have to provide training and
Yeah, that's
provide the
true.
fall protection equipment and make sure that people are wearing it. Yes, you have to do all those things. You also have to have a plan if there is a fall. Just like if there's a fire, you know how to use the fire extinguisher. If someone falls, 911 is not an adequate rescue plan. If someone falls in a harness, suspension trauma can set in within
Mm.
8 to 10 minutes, which is where the harness, your D ring at the back, is now all of a sudden over your head. And those leg straps are now digging into your femoral arteries and cutting off your blood supply. And within 8 to 10 minutes, you can actually experience fatal trauma from suspension. And the fire department's not going to get there and get to you in a rescue situation within that time limit. So there are all kinds of types of rescue. Self-rescue is ideal. That assumes a conscious, uninjured worker that is able to rescue. Hang on, so sorry, 1 minute, but can you still hear me, Jim? My
Yeah, I can
screen,
still hear
okay.
you.
My screens just all went black, so I didn't know if I was still in. It sounds like I'm still in. All right, cool. Sorry about that.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
so
It's a live internet.
so just having a rescue plan, having a written, documented rescue plan. This is what we are going to do if there's a fall. Maybe we're going to use a lift. Maybe we're going to use a rescue ladder. Maybe we're hopefully we're going to ensure that there's trauma straps on all of our harnesses so that when someone falls, again, provided that they're uninjured and conscious, they can deploy their trauma straps, allow themselves a place to stand and reduce the pressure on their arteries, which buys a little bit of time. All of these things are documented in a plan. They're understood, they're read, they're practiced. So and the pieces of that are thought through. Okay, you have a lift on site and your lift is your rescue plan if somebody falls. Great, that's valid. Until Tom's the only one with the keys and Tom's at lunch. That's a problem. Utilizing a rescue ladder is a great part of a rescue plan. Hopefully everybody knows where it's located. It's been inspected regularly so that when you pull it out of the bag and drop it down to your fallen worker, all of the rungs and all of the components are working. And hopefully there's no obstructions. Perhaps the rescue ladder won't reach your fallen worker. So what's your backup plan? There's a statistic about the percent of fatal falls being reduced by 75. I get the 71 and the 75% mixed up, but in more than 70% of falls won't become fatal falls if there's a rescue plan. So somebody's fallen, their fall protection system has worked, but they still are now in a fatal fall because the rescue plan was not appropriate. They were not rescued in enough time. They were not rescued in a safe way. So the rescue plan is a huge part of fall protection and a part that is very frequently overlooked. Little Safeways plug. We're getting ready to release a new rescue training video in June. So super excited about that.
Oh, that's great. That's great because we're talking about with the fall prevention. The ultimate thing is you really want to stop accidents and save lives. That's really the bottom line to it. The other thing too that we should talk about before we close out this stream is fall prevention. Also, too, when you have tools, hammers, and other things that you're utilizing as well, having those lanyards so that if you were to, God forbid, drop something, that becomes literally a blunt force trauma
Right.
weapon lethal weapon in a way. So when it comes to, and I'm not sure with Safeways, do you sell things that are related to safety on tools
We
and things
do.
like
We
that?
have a
Okay.
limited line of tool cuff products, tool tethers, and tool lanyards so that you can actually secure those items that are on your body as you're at height. I always think of the penny falling from the Eiffel Tower or from,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I mean, certainly any of these tools falling off your tool belt could very well become a deadly injury. I don't know if anybody's listening wants to take a guess at the number one dropped object in our comments. And if you want to give them a minute, we can circle back to that.
Yeah, because I have a guess, but I don't know if I'll be right or not.
But yeah, so that's just an important part of the overall safety at height.
Perfect. Well, nobody's bit, so let's go ahead and do it.
What's your
So I
guess?
was gonna say a hammer.
I'm sure it would be in the top 10. The number one dropped object is a cell phone.
Oh my goodness, I was gonna say that. I didn't want
Yeah,
to.
most job sites prohibit them, but it's still the number one dropped object. And the number two is hard hats.
Yeah,
So,
I shouldn't be laughing about it because I'm sure somebody's gotten some serious
seriously hurt from their cell phone.
or
Yep.
worse from a cell phone falling from height. Because like you said, you drop a penny from the Empire State Building or whatever. It's
And that's one of those things that circles back around to productivity and efficiency, right? Even if no one
Mhm.
gets hurt, and you're 2 stories up and you drop your hammer, how much time are you losing on the job site by having to retrieve that or have somebody else retrieve that? So,
Yeah.
it comes back to job site productivity and efficiency by doing the safe thing as well.
So there's more to with fall prevention plans than just, worker safety and site safety. It can also help to ensure that production is running efficiently, effectively, no work stoppages for, rescue or worse. Those
Right.
is important as well when you look at the financial impact of a project or work site. Jill, what an awesome conversation we had again here on fall prevention. Uh, how can people get in touch with you or follow you on social media, or is it just LinkedIn, or how can people stay in touch with you?
I only have LinkedIn. I am social. I have I'm unconscious. That's it. I'm unconscious on social media. I do have a LinkedIn, so you can follow me on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
which is obviously connected to this live stream. So that's an easy way to find me. And my email is jill@safeways.com. So very easy email. We are happy. Obviously, you can go to our website, safeways.com. We have a contact us form on there. You can ask questions of our experts. We're happy to help with fall protection questions, whether it involves our products or not. We are thrilled, always delighted to come out and do trainings. Um, Another one of my favorite sayings is that safety at height begins on the ground, whether that's with your equipment inspections, which are super important, or other types of training. Education and training of the workforce. We were, thrilled to train over 8,000 workers during this National Stand Down Week. Was it just last week or the week before? So we
Yeah,
have a
I
video
think
coming out
yeah.
just last week. We have a video coming out recapping that. So that's always a lot of fun. It's just nice to be able to get in front of folks and just help raise awareness. The flip side we hear sometimes is, no, there's just a week that companies or manufacturers, general contractors, workers focus on safety. And it's awesome that we take a week to focus on safety and include fall protection, but absolutely it needs to be something that is done every week, every day on the job site.
Every hour too, every minute. Very good
Literally, yeah.
topic. Yeah, literally. Great topic. Everyone, next Monday, I'm going to be covering the subject of utilizing drones in industrial painting projects. So that should be a good stream. This Wednesday coming up, I have Paul Prevade. He's with Titan Flooring Solutions. We're going to be talking about adequate floor preparation on concrete for floor systems installation. That's going to be on the LinkedIn audio for audio chat, live audio chat Wednesday evening. And if everyone could continue to subscribe to the Coatings Talk channel, also follow me on LinkedIn and reach out to me if you have any ideas or topics or anything like that you want to cover. But Jill, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. It's great catching up, and it's great to just continue to champion fall protection and make ourselves and our expertise available to all of the industries, and certainly to the coatings industry dear to your heart.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your evening, your day, or your morning, wherever you're coming from watching this live stream. Good night. Well, good night for Jill and I.
That's right. Good night from us.